Officer Daniel Carter's name carried weight in the quiet Midwestern town he called home. To neighbors, he was the man who never hesitated to lend a hand. To his colleagues, he was the steady pulse in the chaos of law enforcement. With over a decade of service on the force, Daniel had seen enough to make most men cynical. Yet, behind his sharp eyes and the authoritative tone of his radio voice, there was a softness most only glimpsed when his canine partner, Rex, was at his side. Rex, a powerful German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes, had been Daniel's partner for 4 years, and the two were inseparable, on the job and off. Together, they had chased down criminals, searched through disaster rubble, and stood guard in countless tense moments. But life had recently given Daniel a new kind of assignment, one that no badge or training manual could fully prepare him for. Fatherhood. Just weeks before, he had become the foster parent of a 9-year-old boy named Ethan. Daniel had never married, though his heart had always ached for family. The idea of fostering had come after years of community outreach programs and late-night reflections on the children he saw caught in cycles of neglect and crime. He told himself that if he could make a difference for even one child, it would matter more than any case file stacked on his desk. When the call came about Ethan, something in Daniel's gut told him this was the moment to step forward. Ethan arrived small and fragile, with wary eyes that darted around the room like a bird searching for escape. He carried very little with him: a duffel bag of clothes that didn't quite fit, and silence. Daniel learned quickly that the boy had come from a past filled with shadows, trauma whispered about in case notes, but not spoken aloud in Ethan's presence. Abuse, neglect, instability. The details were enough to make Daniel's chest ache, but he refused to treat Ethan as another tragic statistic. This was his son now, for however long the courts allowed. Their first days together were awkward. Daniel wasn't used to having someone else in his home, someone who sat quietly at the dinner table and pushed peas around on the plate instead of eating them. Rex sensed the tension, often lying beside Ethan with his head resting on the boy's knee, a silent reassurance that Daniel envied. Slowly, cautiously, Ethan began to respond, not to Daniel at first, but to Rex. The dog's loyalty was unshakable, his calm presence a bridge between the boy and the man trying so hard to be his father. Still, there were challenges. Nights were hardest. Sometimes Daniel would wake to the sound of Ethan's cries, muffled into his pillow. The boy never explained the nightmares, but Daniel didn't press. Instead, he would sit quietly on the edge of the bed, offering comfort in the simplest way he knew how, with his presence. It was a different kind of duty, one that required patience rather than authority. Over time, Ethan began to settle. He spoke more, laughed softly when Rex did something silly, and even joined Daniel in the backyard to toss a ball for the dog. Each small victory felt monumental to Daniel. He knew healing wouldn't happen overnight, but he could see trust forming. Fragile yet real. School quickly became part of that routine. Ethan was placed in Class 4B at the local elementary school, a place Daniel hoped would give him structure and normalcy. On most afternoons, when his shift ended in time, Daniel would drive to the school with Rex, the sight of a uniformed officer, and his canine waiting by the gates became a familiar scene for students and teachers alike. Some children squealed with delight, begging to pet Rex, while others whispered about how cool it was that Ethan's dad was a cop. For Ethan, it was both a source of pride and discomfort. He liked the security of Daniel's presence, yet the attention sometimes made him shrink back. Daniel noticed, though, that whenever Rex nudged Ethan with his wet nose, the boy straightened a little taller, his lips twitching toward a smile. That smile was gold to Daniel. Evenings became their favorite time. After dinner, Ethan would often sit at the table with homework spread out, Daniel nearby cleaning Rex's gear or finishing reports. Slowly, it began to feel less like two strangers sharing a house and more like a family learning each other's rhythms. Still, Daniel often lay awake at night, wondering if he was enough. Could a single man with a demanding job and a police dog truly give a wounded boy the life he deserved? He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to quit. Ethan had already been failed too many times. On a crisp October morning, the town bathed in golden leaves. Daniel watched Ethan walk into the school with his backpack bouncing lightly against his shoulders. He stayed a moment longer than usual, Rex sitting at his heel. Something about the way Ethan turned back and gave a small wave before disappearing into Class 4B stirred warmth in Daniel's chest. It was progress. Proof that the boy was beginning to trust him, maybe even rely on him. Daniel couldn't know then how quickly that fragile sense of normalcy would shatter. He couldn't know that in just days, he and Rex would walk into Class 4B and find themselves staring at an empty chair that should have been filled by a boy who had already survived too much. For now, though, he let the warmth linger, unaware of the storm that waited just around the corner. For Ethan, school was a complicated place. On one hand, it was a building full of children his own age, laughter echoing in the hallways, and teachers who tried their best to create stability. On the other, it was also full of eyes curious, judgmental, sometimes even cruel. Children noticed differences quickly, and Ethan's difference was obvious. He didn't arrive with his biological parents like the others. He was the boy whose guardian was a police officer, the boy who was quieter than most, and the boy who sometimes jumped when doors slammed too hard. Yet Class 4B became his small sanctuary. His teacher, Mrs. Gardner, was warm and attentive, with a patience Ethan hadn't experienced before. She never pressed him to share more than he wanted, but she always included him. When she asked the students to pair up, she made sure Ethan wasn't left out. When others rushed to answer questions, she would catch Ethan's hesitant hand in the air and call on him with a smile. Bit by bit, Ethan began to feel seen. The other children were curious about his life. They'd whisper questions when they thought he wasn't listening. Is it true his dad's a cop? Do you think he gets to ride in police cars? What about the dog? Can we pet him? For the most part, Ethan kept quiet, letting their curiosity swirl without offering answers. He wasn't used to attention, and in his past, attention usually meant trouble. But Daniel's presence at the school gate each afternoon with Rex began to change that. It started with glances, then whispers. Soon, Class 4B would erupt in excitement whenever the officer and his K9 appeared outside the chain-link fence. Children pressed their faces against the glass or tugged at Mrs. Gardner's sleeve to be let out faster. Daniel always stood tall, his uniform crisp, Rex sitting obediently at his heel. To the kids, he looked like a hero straight from a TV show. To Ethan, he was something harder to define: a guardian, a stranger he was learning to trust, a man who hadn't yet left him. The first time Daniel let the children approach Rex, Ethan's classmates squealed with delight. The German Shepherd tolerated the pats and giggles, his calm demeanor winning them over instantly. One boy asked, "Does he bite bad guys?" Another chimed in, "Can he sniff out candy?" The laughter was contagious. Ethan stood slightly apart, watching, conflicted. Pride tugged at him. This was his family, his dog, his father figure. But embarrassment tangled with it, making him unsure how to respond. Daniel noticed. He crouched to Rex's level, beckoned Ethan forward, and said in a voice both gentle and firm, "Rex listens best to you." The children gasped as Ethan whispered a command, and Rex obeyed instantly, sitting and lifting a paw. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just the quiet boy in the corner. He was the center of attention in a good way. His classmates clapped, and Mrs. Gardner smiled knowingly. That small moment planted something new inside Ethan, a sense of belonging. Over the next few weeks, routine wove itself into their lives. Each morning, Daniel drove Ethan to school in the patrol SUV, though he parked a block away to avoid embarrassing the boy. Rex often sat in the back, head out the window, tongue lolling happily. Ethan would climb out quietly, adjusting the straps of his too big backpack, and walk toward the doors with measured steps. He never ran like the other kids, but Daniel noticed his pace quickening over time. That was progress. Afternoons became their ritual. When Daniel's shifts allowed, he and Rex would wait outside Class 4B. Sometimes they lingered by the playground, where younger children swarmed Rex with sticky hands and wide eyes. Sometimes they stayed near the steps, Daniel watching through the glass as Ethan gathered his things. Every time, Daniel's chest tightened with something he hadn't expected: pride. Seeing Ethan emerge from that classroom, shoulders a little straighter each day, was better than any commendation he'd ever received on the job. Ethan's classmates grew braver too. They started asking him questions directly. What's it like having a police officer for a dad? Does Rex sleep in your room? At first, Ethan shrugged, but slowly his answers came. Short, simple, but enough to satisfy. One afternoon, when a boy teased him about probably getting arrested if he misbehaved, Ethan surprised everyone by replying firmly, "Daniel doesn't arrest me. He takes care of me." The room had gone quiet, and Mrs. Gardner had placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It was one of those rare moments where Ethan's voice carried strength instead of hesitation. Still, shadows lingered. Ethan sometimes froze when strangers entered the classroom, or when substitute teachers raised their voices too sharply. Mrs. Gardner kept Daniel informed in discreet conversations at pickup. "He's making progress," she would say, "but there's still fear under the surface." Daniel would nod, grateful but also aching. He wished he could erase Ethan's past, but he knew all he could do was build a new future. Rex remained a bridge between them. The dog had a sixth sense about Ethan's moods. On evenings when the boy retreated into silence, Rex nudged his hand until Ethan giggled. On mornings when nightmares clung too tightly, Rex lay across his feet under the table, grounding him. Daniel often marveled at how the animal seemed to know exactly what the boy needed. Sometimes Daniel admitted to himself, Rex was better at this parenting thing than he was. The town began to notice too. At the grocery store, people greeted Daniel warmly, asking about the new addition to your family. Some neighbors dropped by with small gifts for Ethan: books, puzzles, even a soccer ball. Though Ethan rarely responded with more than a shy thank you, Daniel could see the flicker of gratitude in his eyes. People cared. For a boy who had known so little kindness, that mattered. One particular afternoon stood out. Ethan had drawn a picture in class. Himself, Daniel, and Rex standing together under a blue sky. When Mrs. Gardner handed it to Daniel with a smile, he felt his throat tighten. Ethan had written one word at the top in uneven letters: family. Daniel carried that paper in his patrol car for weeks afterward, tucked into the visor where he could see it whenever doubt crept in. Life wasn't perfect. Ethan still had bad days, moments where he shut down or snapped in frustration. Daniel still wrestled with exhaustion, juggling the unpredictability of police work with the demands of parenting. But the school routine gave them both something invaluable: stability. Each day began and ended with connection, a rhythm they could count on. Neither of them could have known that this ordinary pattern, the drop-offs, the pickups, the small triumphs in class 4B, would soon be shattered by an event that would test every ounce of Daniel's resolve as both officer and father. The call that came one afternoon would break the rhythm they had built, turning a familiar school day into the beginning of a nightmare. But before that moment, in those quiet weeks, Ethan had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had found a place where he belonged. And Daniel had begun to believe that fatherhood, as messy and uncertain as it was might be the most important duty of his life. The day began like any other. The October sky stretched pale blue, dotted with wisps of white clouds. Daniel Carter finished his morning patrols, filled out reports, and even allowed himself a rare quiet coffee break in the precinct kitchen. Rex lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes half closed, but ears flicking at every sound. For once, there was no emergency call pulling him from his desk, no crisis demanding immediate attention. His thoughts wandered instead to Ethan, wondering how the boy was doing in school that day. Ethan had seemed lighter that morning, humming softly as he tied his shoelaces before school. It wasn't a tune Daniel recognized, but hearing the boy make music at all was a milestone. "Ready, kiddo?" Daniel had asked, and Ethan gave a small nod, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Even Rex had wagged his tail, as if recognizing the moment. Daniel couldn't help but feel proud. Progress, slow as it was happening. That sense of calm carried through most of the day until the phone on Daniel's desk rang. The number flashing across the screen made his heart skip. It was the elementary school. He picked up instantly. "Officer Carter," he answered, his voice steady but alert. The secretary's voice came on the line, soft and careful. "Mr. Carter? This is Mrs. Yates from the front office. We need you to come pick up Ethan. Sooner rather than later." Daniel's hand tightened around the receiver. "Is he sick?" A pause. Too long. "No, not exactly," Mrs. Yates said, her words faltering. "He's well. It's best if you come. His teacher thought it would be a good idea. Please." Her tone gnawed at him. This wasn't the usual call about a child with a fever or a forgotten lunch. There was something else beneath her words, something unspoken. Daniel's instincts, honed by years of reading between the lines, bristled. "I'll be there in 10, he said, his voice clipped. He hung up, already reaching for Rex's leash. The dog lifted his head, sensing the shift in energy. "Come on, partner," Daniel muttered. Rex rose immediately, alert now, tail stiff. The drive to the school blurred past in fragments, the hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on asphalt, the autumn leaves tumbling across the road. Daniel's pulse thudded harder with each passing block. He tried to push back the flood of worst-case scenarios that years of policing had carved into his mind. Maybe Ethan had gotten into a fight. Maybe he'd broken down crying in class. Maybe the memories of his past had surfaced too strongly. But the longer Daniel replayed the secretary's hesitant tone, the less those explanations fit. As he turned into the school's parking lot, he noticed right away that something was off. A cluster of teachers stood near the entrance, speaking in hushed tones. Their expressions shifted when they saw him, relief mixed with something heavier. Daniel parked, stepped out, and Rex jumped down beside him, muscles tense. The moment he walked through the front doors, the atmosphere pressed in. Schools usually carried a certain noise: footsteps, laughter, the shuffle of papers. But today, the air was muted, as though the building itself held its breath. Children passed in lines, their voices low, glancing at him and Rex with wide eyes before quickly looking away. Mrs. Yates waited by the office counter, her fingers clasped tightly together. "Officer Carter," she said with forced calm. "Thank you for coming so quickly. What happened?" Daniel asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Her lips parted, but no answer came. Instead, she gestured down the hall. "You'll want to go straight to Class 4B. Mrs. Gardner is there with the students." Daniel's jaw clenched. The lack of detail only made his pulse quicken. He gave a short nod and set off down the hallway, Rex trotting at his side. The sound of his boots against the tile echoed too loudly in the hushed corridors. As he approached the wing where Ethan's classroom was located, he noticed the unease more clearly. A boy peered out from another classroom door, then ducked back inside when Daniel's gaze met his. A teacher whispered to a colleague and cast a worried glance toward Class 4B. By the time Daniel reached the door, his chest was tight. He paused for a breath, forcing calm. On the job, panic was poison. He knew how to slow his thoughts, how to ground himself in the moment. But this wasn't just another case. This was Ethan. He pushed open the door. Class 4B, usually alive with the chatter of 9-year-olds, was unusually still. The desks were filled, but the children sat in uneasy silence, their eyes downcast. The air felt thick, as if the room itself carried a weight no one wanted to name. At the front, Mrs. Gardner looked up. Her face was pale, her hands twisting nervously. When she saw Daniel, relief flickered across her expression, followed quickly by worry. She stepped forward, her voice low. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry to call you like this, but," she broke off, glancing toward Ethan's desk. Daniel followed her gaze. The seat was empty. His son's backpack slumped against the chair leg, half unzipped. The sight hit him like a blow, stealing the air from his lungs. Rex stiffened beside him, ears pricked, tail rigid. The dog's low rumble vibrated in the quiet, as if he sensed what Daniel's gut already knew. Something was very wrong. Daniel's eyes darted around the classroom. The children avoided his gaze, some fidgeting nervously, others staring at the empty desk as if it held the answer. Every fiber of his training screamed at him to stay calm, to assess before reacting, but the father in him wanted to shout, to demand answers. Mrs. Gardner's hands trembled as she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "He isn't here." Daniel's chest constricted. The words echoed louder than any siren. He took one slow step toward Ethan's desk, his breath steady but shallow. On the desktop lay a single folded piece of paper, untouched. Waiting. Rex growled again, pressing his nose toward the backpack, his agitation growing. Daniel's pulse thundered. He reached for the note, his fingers brushing against the paper, his instincts screaming that this wasn't a simple absence, that this wasn't Ethan's doing. The classroom around him blurred. All he could feel was the weight of silence, the heavy eyes of frightened children, and the dread that whatever he was about to read would change everything. For the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt fear not for himself, not for a case, but for the boy who had just begun to trust him. And as he unfolded the note, his heart braced for the storm it carried. The note trembled in Daniel's hand as he unfolded it, the paper crinkling against his calloused fingers. His eyes scanned the words, hastily written in uneven letters, as though composed in panic or under duress. "Don't look for me. I can't stay. It's safer this way." Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. The message was short, but every syllable carried the echo of desperation. And the handwriting, he knew Ethan's careful, almost timid penmanship from evenings spent helping with homework. This wasn't it. The strokes were clumsy, inconsistent, wrong. Someone had tried to mimic a child's hand, but Daniel could see the deception instantly. Rex pressed his nose closer to Ethan's backpack, tail stiff, ears up. A growl rumbled low in his throat, vibrating through the tense silence of the classroom. Daniel dropped the note into an evidence bag he carried from habit, then crouched by the desk. The backpack gave off Ethan's familiar scent soap, crayons, faint traces of the dog fur that clung to his sweaters at home. But beneath it was something else. Something sharp, foreign. Chemical. Mrs. Gardner wrung her hands together, her voice trembling. "He was here this morning, Officer Carter. He seemed fine. Quieter than usual, but fine. After lunch, he asked to sharpen his pencil. He never came back. We thought he was in the restroom. But then?" She gestured weakly toward the note. Daniel rose to his full height, towering over the room. His gaze swept the children. Some looked frightened, others guilty, but none seemed surprised. That disturbed him most of all. Did anyone see him leave? Talk to anyone? His voice carried the command of authority, honed by years on the force, but beneath it throbbed the desperate plea of a father. The class hesitated until a boy in the back raised his hand reluctantly. His voice cracked when he spoke. He was talking to someone at the door. A man. I thought it was his uncle or something. Daniel's stomach twisted. Ethan had no uncle, no relatives who visited. Every detail of his case file was etched into Daniel's memory. Whoever the child had seen was no family member. What did he look like? Daniel pressed. The boy's brow furrowed as he tried to recall. Tall, wearing a cap. I couldn't see his face. Daniel's mind spun. A stranger. A staged note. A missing boy. This wasn't a case of a frightened foster child running away. This was something calculated, deliberate. Rex let out a sharp bark that made the children flinch. He circled the desk, nose dragging across the floor tiles, then shot toward the door, pawing at it, whining. His instincts screamed the truth louder than words. Ethan had left this classroom, but not willingly. Mrs. Gardner stepped closer, her voice breaking. Officer Carter? Is he, do you think? Daniel held up a hand to steady her, though his own pulse thundered. I'll find him, he said firmly, more to himself than anyone else. I swear I'll find him. The children's wide eyes followed his every movement. To them, Daniel wasn't just an officer in uniform. He was the boy's father, and their safety felt tied to his resolve. He could sense their fear like static in the air. If he faltered, so would they. He turned to Mrs. Gardner. Lock this classroom down. No one leaves until the school resource officer clears them. Tell the principal we need to secure all exits immediately. If someone took Ethan, they may still be on or near the grounds. The teacher nodded shakily, rushing to comply. Daniel strode into the hallway. Rex at his side, the dog's nose low, tail rigid. The faintest trace of Ethan's scent trailed toward the corridor, weaving past rows of lockers and leading toward the rear exit of the school. As they moved, Daniel's thoughts churned with a storm of questions. Who would want to take Ethan? The boy had only been with him for a few months. His biological parents were stripped of custody for neglect and abuse. The file said they'd disappeared out of state. Could one of them have returned? Or was this tied to something else from his past, something not written in the case file? Rex pulled harder, nails clicking against the linoleum. Daniel lengthened his stride, pulse quickening. He forced himself to focus. Panic was no use. He had a scent trail. He had training. And he had the will of a father, determined to bring his son home. The trail led them out a side door, the metal frame still swinging slightly, as if recently pushed open. Outside, the autumn air struck sharp and cold. Leaves skittered across the pavement. Rex paused, nose to the ground, circling, then jerked his head toward the fence line at the edge of the schoolyard. Daniel followed, his eyes scanning for any clue. Then he saw a faint scuff in the dirt near the fence, the kind left by a small shoe dragging. Ethan's shoe. His throat tightened. He crouched, brushing his fingers over the mark. It was fresh. Recent. Rex barked once, urgent, pulling at the leash. The trail continued beyond the fence, into the woods bordering the school. For a heartbeat, Daniel hesitated. Not out of fear for himself, but out of calculation. The school needed to be locked down, other officers needed to be called in, and protocol demanded patience. But every second he delayed was another second Ethan was further away. He reached for his radio, calling it in with clipped urgency. Dispatch, this is Carter. Possible abduction. Child missing from Lincoln Elementary, Class 4B. Suspect male, last seen near classroom. K9 has a trail leading east into the woods. Requesting immediate backup and perimeter lockdown. The reply crackled through. tense. Copy, Carter. Units en route. Secure the scene until backup arrives. But Daniel was already moving, Rex leading the charge toward the tree line. Hang on, buddy, he whispered under his breath. Words meant for Ethan, though the boy couldn't hear. I'm coming. Behind him, the school remained a shell of whispers and fear. Ahead, the woods loomed, dark and sprawling, swallowing the trail into shadow. Every instinct told Daniel the answers lay within Dot as the crunch of leaves echoed beneath his boots, and Rex pulled him deeper. The officer's thoughts narrowed to a single, uncheckable truth. Whoever had dared to take Ethan had made a grave mistake, and Daniel Carter was about to prove it. The forest closed in like a living wall, branches arching overhead and blotting out the fading afternoon light. Daniel's boots crushed damp leaves with every step as Rex surged forward, the leash straining under the dog's determination. The German shepherd's nose swept the ground in a zigzag, tail rigid with focus. Every fiber of the animal radiated urgency. Daniel's training told him to wait for backup, but fatherhood screamed otherwise. Every crunch of twigs, every whisper of wind through the trees, reminded him Ethan was somewhere out here frightened, alone, and possibly in the company of someone dangerous. Easy, boy, Daniel whispered, though his own pulse hammered with restless dread. Rex whined, tugging harder, his body language insisting there wasn't a second to waste. The trail veered sharply, leaving the beaten path and diving into a denser patch of undergrowth. Daniel pushed through, branches clawing at his uniform, the metallic tong of adrenaline sour on his tongue. Then, abruptly, Rex stopped, ears pricked, head low. His growl rolled like thunder in his chest. Daniel froze, listening. At first, there was only the hush of leaves in the wind. Then a sound that didn't belong. A faint scrape, the scuff of fabric against bark. And underneath it, a muffled sob. Ethan. The officer's heart clenched. He stepped cautiously, hand drifting toward the holster at his side, every sense straining. He crept forward until the trees thinned slightly, revealing a small clearing, and there he was. Ethan sat huddled against the base of an oak tree, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. His face was pale, streaked with tears, his small body trembling with fear. Relief struck Daniel like a blow, nearly buckling his knees. He wanted to rush forward, to scoop the boy into his arms, but something stopped him, because Ethan wasn't alone. Standing just a few feet away was a man tall, broad-shouldered, his features obscured by the brim of a cap pulled low. One gloved hand clutched Ethan's shoulder, the other holding what looked like a folded piece of paper. The man's head snapped up at Rex's growl, eyes narrowing beneath the cap's shadow. "Stay back," the stranger hissed, his voice low and rough. His grip on Ethan tightened, making the boy flinch. Daniel's blood went cold. He raised his hands slightly, palms outward, the universal signal of caution. "It's okay," he said evenly, voice steady, though his chest roared with rage. "You don't want to hurt him," the man sneered. "You don't know what I want." His gaze flicked to Rex, still bristling, ready to launch at a single command. Daniel's mind raced. The note, the staged disappearance. This was orchestrated. Whoever this man was, he'd lured Ethan out of class, counting on the child's confusion and fear. But why? For ransom? Revenge? Or something darker? "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, his tone sharpening. "Why take him?" The man chuckled bitterly. "Take? No, officer. I'm just here to collect what should have been mine all along." Ethan whimpered, shaking his head furiously. "No, don't let him, please." His voice cracked, raw with terror, the words carved into Daniel's chest like a blade. This wasn't just a random abductor. Ethan knew this man, and feared him deeply. Rex lunged forward suddenly, teeth bared, and the man jerked back instinctively, loosening his grip on Ethan. Seizing the moment, Daniel barked, "Rex, hold!" The dog froze in place, growling, a living wall of muscle and teeth between the man and the boy. Daniel's eyes locked on Ethan's. "It's okay, son. I've got you. Come here." For a heartbeat, Ethan hesitated, paralyzed by terror. But then he bolted, scrambling across the leaves and into Daniel's open arms. Daniel pulled him close, heart soaring at the boy's small frame pressed against his chest. "I've got you. You're safe." But the moment of relief was fleeting, because the man didn't run. Instead, he straightened, his face finally visible in the dim light. His features were hard, weathered, but unmistakable. Daniel's breath caught. He recognized him. From Ethan's case file. The mugshot buried deep in the foster care paperwork. The biological uncle. A man flagged for abuse, banned from contact, presumed to have disappeared years ago. "You shouldn't have gotten in the way," the uncle snarled, voice dripping with venom. "That boy belongs to family, not to some cop playing house." Daniel's grip on Ethan tightened. Fury and disbelief surged inside him. "You lost the right to call yourself family the moment you hurt him. He's mine now, and you'll never lay a hand on him again." The uncle's lips curled into a twisted smile. "We'll see." Then he turned and bolted into the trees, vanishing into the shadows with startling speed. Daniel half rose to pursue, but Ethan's desperate cry anchored him in place. "Don't leave me." The boy's arms locked around his neck, shaking violently. Daniel froze, torn between the chase and the trembling child clinging to him. For once, the officer's instincts yielded to the father's. He exhaled slowly, pressing his cheek to Ethan's hair. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Rex barked, pacing, eager to give chase, but Daniel gave a sharp hand signal. The dog halted reluctantly, circling back to guard them. The forest grew quiet again, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Daniel pulled back enough to look into Ethan's face. The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, wide and terrified, yet in their depths flickered something else. Trust. For the first time, Ethan clung not out of fear alone, but with the belief that Daniel would keep his promise. "It's over," Daniel whispered, though he knew it wasn't. Not yet. The uncle was still out there. The danger wasn't gone. But for now, Ethan was safe, alive, and in his arms, and that was enough. He radioed in with steady hands, reporting the encounter, giving a suspect description, ordering units to sweep the woods. His voice was calm, professional, but inside, the fire raged hotter than ever. Because this wasn't just another case. This was personal. As officer sirens wailed in the distance and Rex stood watch. Daniel swore silently that he would hunt the man down, no matter how long it took. No one would steal his son from him. Not ever. The shocking discovery in Class 4B had unraveled into something darker than anyone expected. And though the immediate danger had passed, the storm had only just begun. The forest still hummed with the adrenaline of what had just happened. Daniel kept one arm around Ethan. The boy pressed tightly against his chest, as if letting go for even a second would risk losing him again. Rex sat alert at their side, ears flicking with every sound, ready to spring if danger reappeared. The wail of approaching sirens threaded through the distance, growing louder. Backup was finally arriving, but to Daniel, the delay felt unforgivable. Seconds had already been wasted, and Ethan's uncle had used every one of them to slip deeper into the woods. Still, for now, Ethan was safe. That fact anchored Daniel in the storm. He could feel the boy's rapid heartbeat against his chest, his small frame trembling with leftover fear. Daniel bent his head, his voice low but steady. "You're okay, son. He can't hurt you." "Not while I'm here." Ethan didn't answer, but his tiny fists punched into Daniel's uniform, clinging tighter. Trust was being forged in that moment, raw and unspoken. When the first officers appeared, flashlights slicing through the trees, Daniel straightened. He handed Ethan gently to a waiting paramedic, crouching to reassure the boy. "Stay with them, all right? Rex will be here too." Rex nudged Ethan with his nose, sitting protectively at his side as if promising loyalty. Only then did Daniel turn to the other officers. "He's not gone far," Daniel reported, voice clipped with focus. White male, mid-40s tall, wearing a dark cap. "He's Ethan Carter's biological uncle, was barred from contact years ago. He staged the abduction, forged the note, lured him out of class." The officers exchanged grim looks. They knew what that meant. This wasn't a random incident. It was targeted, personal, and dangerous. "Perimeters being set up," one of them confirmed. "We'll comb the woods. No one gets in or out without being checked." Daniel nodded, but kept his jaw tight. Protocol was necessary, but protocol didn't move fast enough for a man like the uncle, desperate, reckless, and willing to risk everything. While the search team spread out, Daniel remained near Ethan, crouching beside him. "Do you know why he came today? Did he say anything?" His voice was gentle, coaxing rather than interrogating. Ethan's eyes darted, uncertain, before settling on the ground. He said I had to come with him, that I didn't belong with you. He said he'd make things right this time." His lip quivered, tears brimming again. "But I don't want him. I want to stay with you." The words hit Daniel harder than any blow he'd taken on the job. He reached out, brushing Ethan's hair back. "You're with me. That's not changing. Not now, not ever." But inside, his fury deepened. The uncle hadn't just tried to take Ethan physically. He was trying to poison the boy's fragile sense of belonging, to rip open wounds that were barely beginning to heal. As paramedics checked Ethan for injuries, Daniel pulled aside one of the detectives who had arrived. "I want his case file reopened. We need every detail on the uncle, his history, known associates, last known addresses. There's no way he just surfaced out of nowhere." The detective nodded. "We'll pull records tonight. You should know, though, if the uncle's resurfaced, he might not be working alone. These guys don't always act in isolation." The suggestion made Daniel's stomach knot. If there were others tied to Ethan's past, the boy was in even more danger than they'd thought. As officers swept through the forest with search dogs, Daniel stayed close to Ethan, watching every flicker of his expression. The boy's fear hadn't subsided. It had only shifted into something heavier. And Daniel realized this wasn't just about what happened today. "Ethan," he said softly, crouching again to meet his eyes, "I need you to tell me the truth. Has your uncle tried to contact you before? Letters, phone calls, anything at school?" For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, hesitantly, he nodded. He left a note in my locker last week. I didn't tell anyone. I thought if I ignored it, he'd go away." His voice cracked. "But he didn't." Daniel exhaled slowly, anger burning behind his controlled expression. So this had been brewing for days, maybe weeks, right under their noses. "You did nothing wrong," Daniel reassured him quickly. "He tricked you. That's on him, not you." But the revelation unraveled more than Daniel had expected. The uncle hadn't acted on impulse. He'd planned this. He'd scouted the school, watched Ethan, tested his reach. And if one note had slipped through, how many others had gone unnoticed? A deputy approached, face grim. "We've got tire tracks near the service road on the east end. Looks like a vehicle was stashed there." "He's long gone." Daniel clenched his fists. "Gone for now. But he'd be back." Men like that didn't vanish quietly, not when they thought they still had a claim. Back at the school, chaos still simmered. Teachers huddled in whispered conversations. Parents clutched their children tighter, and Class 4B sat subdued, As though the innocence of their world had been cracked open, Daniel escorted Ethan inside briefly so he could collect his things. The classroom felt colder now, the empty desk a chilling reminder of what had nearly happened. Some of the kids glanced at Ethan, sympathy mingling with fear, but none dared to speak. Mrs. Gardner approached Daniel quietly, guilt etched across her face. I should have noticed something sooner. He seemed distracted these past days. I didn't push him. Daniel shook his head firmly. Don't blame yourself. He's a cautious kid. If he didn't want to talk, he wouldn't have. This isn't on you. It's on the man who tried to take him. But even as he said it, he knew vigilance would have to sharpen across every corner of Ethan's life. That night, back at their house, Daniel tucked Ethan into bed with Rex lying stretched out at the foot like a silent sentinel. The boy clung to his stuffed toy, eyes heavy but refusing to close. Will he come back? Ethan whispered finally, voice barely audible. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, his hand steady on Ethan's shoulder. If he does, he'll have to get through me, and Rex, and every officer in this town. He doesn't stand a chance. A small smile flickered across Ethan's lips at the mention of Rex. He reached down, brushing his fingers against the dog's fur, finding comfort in the solid warmth. Daniel leaned closer. You're not alone anymore. He can't touch you. You're safe here, always. Minutes later, Ethan's breathing slowed into restless sleep. Daniel lingered in the doorway, watching the boy's fragile peace, the storm of his thoughts refusing to quiet, because deep down, he knew tonight was only the beginning. The truth was unraveling, and with it, a past darker and more dangerous than Ethan had ever revealed. The uncle's sudden reappearance wasn't chance. It was a warning, a signal of something bigger stirring in the shadows. And Daniel Carter swore he would tear through every secret, every hidden corner of that darkness, until the boy who now called him Dad could finally sleep without fear. The morning after the abduction attempt dawned gray and unsettled, the kind of sky that hinted at rain, but never quite committed. Daniel Carter barely noticed. He had spent most of the night in the precinct, combing through Ethan's reopened case files with detectives and child services officers. The image of Ethan's biological uncle stared up from the mugshot, a face hardened by years of violence, anger lurking in the eyes. His name, Randall Keene. Randall had once been charged with child endangerment, drug possession, and suspected trafficking, but many of the charges hadn't stuck. He had slipped through the cracks of the system. And now he was back, circling like a predator, convinced the boy still belonged to him. Daniel felt the weight of responsibility, pressing like armor against his chest. He wasn't just a cop on a case, he was a father defending his son. And this time, the law wouldn't be enough. He'd need instinct, vigilance, and a willingness to risk everything. Ethan sat at the kitchen table that morning, a bowl of cereal untouched in front of him. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, shadows beneath them betraying his sleepless night. Rex lay stretched across the floor, eyes half shut but ears twitching, protective even in rest. Daniel poured himself a cup of black coffee, studying the boy carefully. You don't have to go to school today if you don't want to, he said. No one would blame you. Ethan shook his head slowly. I want to. If I don't, it's like he wins. His small voice carried a surprising weight of determination. Daniel's chest swelled with pride, though fear lingered beneath. All right, he said softly. But Rex and I will be with you every step of the way. He won't get near you again. By the time they reached the school, the building looked more like a fortress than a place of learning. 2 patrol cars idled at the curb, officers stationed at each entrance. Parents lingered nervously, whispering about what had happened, while children cast cautious glances at Ethan as he walked inside. Daniel stayed long enough to watch him settle into Class 4B, Rex sitting sentinel at the doorway. The other kids whispered, but their stares weren't cruel, if anything. They looked at Ethan with awe, as though he had survived a story that was larger than life. Still, Daniel's gut refused to settle. He patrolled the hallways, alert for the smallest anomaly, while his phone buzzed with updates from the task force assigned to track Randall Keene. At noon, just as the children were lining up for lunch, a call came through Daniel's radio. "Carter, we've got movement. Report of a male matching Keene's description near the East Service Road, heading into the industrial park. Units en route." Daniel's heart lurched. He glanced into the classroom where Ethan sat quietly, then back to Rex, who already seemed to sense the shift. The dog's tail stiffened, eyes alert, body coiled for action. Daniel knelt quickly beside Ethan. "I need to step out for a bit, but I'll be back before the day ends. You're safe here. The officers will keep watch, and Rex is staying with you." Ethan looked panicked. "No, don't go." "What if?" Daniel gripped his shoulder firmly. "I have to, son. This is the best way to make sure he never comes back. Do you trust me?" The boy's lips trembled. Then finally, reluctantly, he nodded. "Yeah, I trust you." Daniel squeezed once more, then stood. "Good. I'll see you soon," he whistled softly, signaling Rex, who whined in protest but obeyed, sitting back beside Ethan like a loyal shadow. Within minutes, Daniel was in his cruiser, lights flashing, siren cutting through the midday quiet. The industrial park wasn't far, an abandoned stretch of warehouses on the edge of town, half forgotten except for the occasional trucker or drifter. It was the perfect place for a man like Randall to vanish. He arrived to find 2 patrol cars already parked at the perimeter. Officers briefed him quickly. Witness saw him slip through the fence near Building 12. No sign of him since? Daniel's jaw set. Building 12 loomed ahead, its windows shattered, the paint peeling from its rusted siding. Shadows pooled in the broken doorways. He unholstered his weapon, flashlight clipped to his vest. "Let's move," he ordered. Inside, the air was damp and stale, reeking of mold and oil. Their footsteps echoed across the cracked concrete floor. Daniel's beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating overturned crates and rusted machinery. Then came the sound, a faint shuffle, quick and sharp. Daniel raised a fist, signaling silence. The officers froze. He heard it again, this time accompanied by the scrape of metal. Someone was here. Keene. Daniel's voice thundered through the empty space. "This is over. Come out with your hands up." For a moment, nothing. Then a laugh, low, mocking, drifting from the shadows. "You think you've won, officer?" The voice reverberated across the walls. "You can't keep him from me forever. He's blood. He'll always come back." Daniel's muscles tensed. The sound was disembodied, echoing from everywhere at once. He swept his flashlight across the cavernous space, searching for movement. A blur flickered in the corner of his vision. He spun, but the figure melted deeper into the building, agile as a shadow. The chase was on. "Go!" Daniel barked. Boots pounded against the concrete as officers fanned out. Daniel followed the blur through a narrow hallway, heart hammering, gun raised. Randall darted ahead, his movements quick, desperate, as though fueled by obsession rather than strategy. They burst out into a loading bay, sunlight streaming through broken doors. Randall glanced back, eyes wild, then sprinted toward the far exit. Daniel pushed harder, closing the distance inch by inch, but Randall was cunning. He vaulted over a rusted railing, disappearing into the lower level. By the time Daniel reached the spot, a man had vanished again, leaving only the hollow echo of his footsteps. Frustration seared through Daniel. He scanned the shadows, every muscle taut, but the warehouse swallowed Randall whole. When the officers regrouped, breathless, they had little more than Scrap's boot prints in the dust, a cigarette still smoldering, and the faint impression of a bedroll in one corner. Randall had been using the building as a hideout. But now he was gone again. Daniel holstered his weapon, fists clenched. Another near miss. Another reminder of how slippery this man could be. That something else nagged at him, a detail in Randall's taunt. You can't keep him from me forever. He'll always come back. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise, maybe even a plan. Randall believed Ethan would return to him willingly or be forced to. That meant he wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Back at the school, Daniel returned to find Ethan waiting anxiously, Rex beside him. The boy's relief was palpable, his small frame sagging against Daniel's side when he embraced him. You came back, Ethan whispered. Always, Daniel said, his voice firm with conviction. But as he held his son, his eyes narrowed with grim resolve. The chase wasn't over. Randall Keene was still out there, circling closer with every attempt. And the next time, Daniel knew the confrontation would be even more dangerous, because predators didn't give up easily. And neither did fathers. The week following Randall Keene's escape was the longest of Daniel Carter's life. Every shift bled into the next, every hour consumed by updates, patrols, and strategy meetings. Sleep came only in fragments, haunted by nightmares of Ethan's chair in Class 4B, sitting empty forever. Despite the exhaustion, Daniel never wavered. He doubled security around Ethan, worked hand in hand with detectives, and kept Rex by Ethan's side at all times. The German shepherd never let the boy out of sight, shadowing him with a silent promise. Nothing would happen on his watch, but tension gnawed at the household. Ethan, though brave, carried fear like an anchor. He flinched at sudden noises, stared too long at shadows, and asked Daniel almost nightly, "What if he comes back?" Daniel would pull him close, pressing his forehead against Ethan's. "Then I'll be there. And Rex will be there. He'll never win." Still, words couldn't erase the looming threat. And deep down, Daniel knew Randall wasn't done. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday night. The storm rumbled over town, fat drops hammering against rooftops when a call came over the precinct's radio. A trucker had reported a suspicious figure near the old train depot, tall, disheveled, and pacing with erratic movements. The description was enough to snap Daniel into motion. The depot sat at the edge of town, abandoned for years, except by the occasional vandal. It was close enough to the school to be a staging ground. Daniel's instinct screamed. This was it. He geared up swiftly, pulling on his vest, checking his weapon. As he turned, he saw Ethan standing in the doorway of his bedroom, wide-eyed. "Dad, don't go," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. Daniel crouched, placing steady hands on the boy's trembling shoulders. "Listen to me, son. If I don't go, he'll keep coming. This has to end tonight." Ethan's eyes welled. "What if you don't come back?" Daniel's throat tightened, but he held his son's gaze firmly. "I will, because I have to. Because you're waiting for me. Do you trust me?" Ethan nodded, silent tears streaking his cheeks. Rex whined softly, pressing against Ethan's side as if offering his own reassurance. Daniel kissed the top of the boy's head, then stood. "Stay with Officer Reynolds downstairs. She'll keep you safe." Minutes later, Daniel and Rex were tearing down rain-slicked streets, cruiser lights flashing blue against the storm. The depot loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette of rusted steel and broken windows. The task force had already cordoned off the area. Daniel stepped out, rain pelting against his cap, Rex straining at the leash, hackles raised. Keene's inside, an officer confirmed. Spotted moving between rail cars. Armed, most likely desperate. Daniel nodded. "Then let's finish this." They moved as a unit, fanning through the depot's skeletal remains. Thunder rattled the roof. Flashlights pierced the gloom. And then movement. A shadow darted between crates. Randall! Daniel's voice echoed, sharp, commanding. "This ends now. Come out." Laughter answered him, low, jagged, filled with mania. "You brought him into your home, Carter. You think you can keep him? He's mine. My blood." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's not yours. He's safe, and he's never going back to you." A figure emerged from behind a derailed boxcar Randall, soaked, unkempt, eyes blazing with obsession. He held a revolver, steady despite his trembling hands. "You don't get it," Randall snarled. "Family is blood. Always blood. Family is love," Daniel shot back. "And you don't know the first thing about it." Randall's expression twisted, rage boiling over. "Then I'll take him back myself." His arm jerked, weapon raising. "Rex, go." The shepherd bolted like a streak of muscle and fur. Randall fired, the shot cracking like lightning. Daniel's heart seized, but Rex barreled forward, teeth clamping onto Randall's wrist, wrenching the gun from his grip. The revolver clattered across the concrete. Skittering into darkness, Daniel surged forward, tackling Randall hard to the ground. They grappled in the rain-soaked dust, Randall thrashing with feral strength, but Daniel's resolve was ironclad. This wasn't just another arrest. This was for Ethan. Blow after blow, the struggle raged until Daniel pinned Randall's arms, cuffs snapping shut with finality. Officers swarmed in, securing the scene. Breathless, soaked, Daniel sat back, staring down at the man who had haunted his son's life. Randall spat curses, thrashing, but it was over. Truly over. Rex padded back, panting, fur matted with rain, eyes locked on Daniel. The dog leaned his head against his partner's knee, grounding him. Daniel exhaled, chest heaving. "Good boy," he whispered hoarsely. Back at the precinct, the paperwork dragged into the early hours, but Daniel hardly cared. When at last he returned home, weary and worn, Ethan was still awake, curled on the couch with a blanket and Officer Reynolds nearby. The moment Daniel stepped inside, Ethan launched forward, colliding into his chest. "You came back," he sobbed, clutching Daniel's shirt with trembling fists. Daniel held him tightly, eyes stinging. "I told you I would." Rex lay down beside them, tail thumping weakly against the floor, as if sealing the moment. Days later, news spread through town. Randall Keene was behind bars, denied bail, facing charges that would keep him locked away for decades. The community breathed easier, but for Daniel and Ethan, the relief was deeper. Personal. Ethan began to heal in ways Daniel hadn't dared to hope. His laughter returned, fragile but real. He joined other kids in Class 4B at recess, shoulders less hunched, steps less hesitant. And every afternoon, when Daniel and Rex arrived to pick him up, Ethan no longer carried fear in his eyes, only trust. One evening, weeks later, Daniel found Ethan sketching at the kitchen table. A boy looked up shyly and slid the paper across. It was a drawing of the three of them, Daniel, Rex, and Ethan, standing hand in hand, the sun rising behind them. At the top, Ethan had written in uneven letters, "My family." Daniel's throat closed. He pulled the boy into a fierce embrace, Rex pressing in beside them. In that moment, he understood something Randall never could. Family wasn't written in blood. It was written in love, in loyalty, in the promises kept when fear tried to tear them apart. And for the first time, Daniel allowed himself to believe they were no longer just surviving. They were a family, one forged in trial, sealed by trust, and destined to endure. The storm had passed, and in its place, a new beginning had dawned.